Hey, it's me, Vicky Marie. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this crazy world we're living in. Anyway, tomorrow we are going into the fourth and possibly last week of the mushroom murder trial. And I thought I'd just do a very short video. This is just a recap, not a death cap, a recap of what we've sort of learnt so far. Now, if there's anything you think I might have missed, I mean, it is an overview. That's all. It's just an overview. It doesn't go into great detail, just to remind everybody where we are. If you think there's anything significant that I've missed, please put it in comments below. So let's look at just have a little summary of this story as we enter this fourth week. So this trial was designated for 4 to 6 weeks. So we're coming to the end of it one way or another, but we're going to go over the main points so far. So Erin Patterson, let me see if I can share this screen and then I can. Yeah. So Erin Patterson, this lady, let's have a look at her. Yeah. She's 50 years old. She invited her in-laws to a lunch on Sunday, July the 29th, 2023, in Leongatha, Victoria, in Australia. And this is about 135 kilometres from Melbourne. You probably won't know Leongatha. You might know Victoria, and you will have heard of Melbourne. So, and despite the fact she was actually estranged from her husband, Simon, she invited him, his parents, Don and Gail Patterson, his uncle, Ian, who's 69, and Heather Wilkinson, 66. And Don and Gail were 70 years old. And Erin said she had something very important to discuss with them. Now, she shares 2 children with Simon. Eventually, Simon decided he wasn't going, so he declined the invitation. Simon, her husband, decided he wasn't going. He said he felt uncomfortable, but the others all went along. Now, Don and Gail, Simon's mum and dad, they had eaten at Erin's before, but rarely, apparently. Ian and Heather had never been invited before. They were described as, she was described as only an acquaintance, really, not somebody that they knew well. They were delighted with the invitation. So at the lunch, Erin served beef Wellington with a mushroom paste and potatoes and veg, etc. Now, apparently, it was served on individual plates, not one big beef Wellington you cut off a slice, individual beef Wellingtons on individual plates. And Erin's plate, apparently, allegedly, was a different colour and a different size to the plates that were given to the others. Although they could choose whichever plate they wanted, Erin's plate was distinct. Allegedly, according to testimony given by the only survivor of that lunch. It was described as delicious, a delicious lunch. And after the meal, Erin dropped the bombshell revelation that in fact she had cancer. And that was why she'd wanted to get them all together there so that they could talk about how best to break it to the children. And they all prayed for her because Ian Wilkinson, one of the guests, the uncle, the wife of Heather Wilkinson, is a pastor. And also Erin's husband, Simon, is a pastor, as well as having a full-time job. So when she dropped that revelation, they all prayed for her. All the guests prayed for her. They discussed how best to break this news to the children. And apparently a good time was had by all. Much later that evening, right late into the evening, because this meal was around 12 midday, 1 o'clock, perhaps by the time they ate. But much later into the evening that night, Don, Gail, Ian, and Heather all started showing symptoms of nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. And these symptoms became so severe they went to hospital. And sadly, very sadly, Don and Gail and Heather died after a few days, despite doctors' best efforts to save them. Ian Wilkinson was the only survivor after a terrible illness and a liver transplant. So, during the trial so far, we've had a lot of testimony from experts about, the things they tested, about the tests that the victims had, anyway, really quite quickly, but unfortunately not quickly enough, the hospital did diagnose that there was deathcap mushrooms. These mushrooms, this was the likely cause, because of the results that were coming back. There were shocking toxicology results, and the experts at the hospital, the doctors, etc., realized that it was likely to be poisoning by deathcap mushrooms, which are mushrooms that grow. They're very toxic, grow near oak trees in Australia. And despite that, and despite being told that she may end up needing a liver transplant because they were trying to scare her into staying at the hospital, Erin, when she went to the hospital, she discharged herself after 5 minutes. And she was reluctant to let her children go to hospital, even though they had eaten some of the leftovers from this beef Wellington, although supposedly without the mushroom paste. So she did return to the hospital later on, but when she was tested, her toxicology results were not like the others, and she was quite quickly released. Now, we heard that shortly before the lunch, Erin had bought a dehydrator, and she had told her friends in a Facebook group she was a member of, a true crime Facebook group, that she was putting dried mushrooms in everything, even her children's chocolate brownies, for some unknown reason. After it was determined that it was probably deathcap mushrooms, Erin was asked, of course, where she'd got the mushrooms from. And she said she had bought the mushrooms, the dried mushrooms. She said she'd used some dried mushrooms, some normal sort of mushrooms that you buy in the supermarket. And she'd bought the dried mushrooms from an Asian supermarket, but she could not remember which one. She'd bought them a few months ago. She was going to put them in a carbonara, and then she decided not to because she said the smell was too strong from them, but she thought they would go well in the beef Wellington. She didn't have the packet. She didn't know the name of the supermarket, and there was no sort of credit card trace of her paying by card anyway in this supermarket. And she said she'd probably, because it was a small transaction, she'd probably paid cash. There was nothing on her bank account to show that she'd been in any Asian supermarket to buy anything by card. Then, of course, what happened after that was, during the trial, the jury were then shown CCTV of Erin dumping the dehydrator that, first of all, she'd denied that she'd ever owned. I think that's important to remember. When she was first interviewed by the police, she said she'd never owned a dehydrator. Eventually, it was determined that she did have a dehydrator, and there was CCTV from a landfill sort of dump waste site, showed Erin going there and dumping her dehydrator. And when that dehydrator was tested, it had traces of deathcap mushrooms in it. We heard that on Friday. That was one of the last things we heard. And she said that she had dumped that dehydrator after first saying she'd never had one. She then said she had dumped it because people were starting to accuse her, and she got worried, scared, whatever, which, you can sort of see that, I suppose. So, but it tested positive for deathcap mushrooms, and also some of the leftovers that were recovered tested positive for deathcap mushrooms. So, just to give a bit of background, Erin was financially stable. From what we know, she'd inherited 2 million Australian dollars from her grandmother, and she'd bought herself a house. She'd been apparently very generous with the rest of, with Simon's family. She'd borrowed Simon's sister, or is it lent, whichever, some money to buy a house, etc. Generally, she seemed to be on good terms still with Simon and his family. And she'd been generous with her inheritance. But everything seemed to go wrong. It seems to me, the way I feel, apparently Erin got a little bit irritated when Simon, on his tax return, declared himself as separated, even though they were separated. From what I can gather, it was Erin who wanted to be separated. Apparently there were various attempts at a reconciliation that just didn't work out. But why it seemed to be Erin who didn't want to get back together, as she complained to some of her friends that Simon was controlling, his house was a mess. He exerted coercive control over her, etc. We don't know the truth of that, but whether she's going to come out. An interesting thing that I think will come up next week or the week after, or however long this is, Erin Patterson going to take the stand? Is she? Is she going to finally admit that she did forage for these mushrooms? Because I think the evidence that we haven't heard so far is apparently there is digital evidence that she did go to these places where these mushrooms could be found. And this is going to be a big problem for Erin, isn't it? So anyway, apparently after this tax declaration where he declared himself as separated, where Simon declared himself as separated, that's when their relationship started to deteriorate a little bit. And over the past year, there had been arguments about houses that they had together, that they were both on the title, but had Erin bought them with her inheritance? You know what money's like. When there's money, problems always rear their head, don't they? So, yeah, she started asking for maintenance then, apparently, which she hadn't asked for before. So, they also, just to let you know, though these charges have been dropped now, there were charges against Erin initially, also for attempted murder on Simon. Now, bearing in mind that Erin, now, in this moment, she's on trial for murder of 3 people and attempted murder. So she's on trial for the murder of Don, his wife, Gail, her sister, Heather, and Heather's husband, Ian. She's charged with attempted murder. But there were originally charges against Erin for the attempted murder of Simon, because there's been other incidents. But in the end, these were dropped. So the jury will be urged only to concentrate on these charges that are in front of her. They can't sort of think about the other charges anymore now. Other news that's happened is one juror was actually dismissed because for allegedly discussing the case with friends and family, which you're not allowed to do. But it doesn't affect the proceedings because initially like 15 jurors were chosen. So they've still got, one of the remaining three will have stepped in for the one that's been dismissed, and they've still got a couple of jurors left. We don't want a mistrial, do we? I mean, for for the family of the victims, etc., for Simon and for Erin's children, etc., for everybody really concerned, it's better that this trial is sorted out here and now. Now, Erin's children have testified, not testified, but the jury was shown videos of interviews with the children just after the incident, where they sort of gave their version of what had happened that day. They weren't there at the lunch, they were at the cinema. But when they came back later, they were told there were some left, and they did eat leftovers, but there was no mushroom paste on these leftovers, apparently. And that, again, made people, it makes you sort of think, because Erin was very reluctant for the children to go to hospital to be checked out. But you'd think, really, 3 people have died. Well, at the time they would have been severely ill, perhaps in comas with this, and the hospital was saying, look, this is deathcap mushroom poisoning. In fact, the hospital was so worried about Erin because she discharged herself. The hospital rang the police. So it's almost to arrest her for her own good, because she was insisting on discharging herself. When when her relatives who were at that lunch were so gravely ill. And that's sort of, something, isn't it, that makes you think. And also she was reluctant for the children to go to hospital. Eventually they did go and get checked out and they were fine, but just strange. To me, I just think, God, if that had happened, well, you wouldn't be able to stop me from taking my children to hospital to get them checked out. It'd be just like, come on, you're checking them out, and that's it. Of course, very odd. These are the odd things about. So there's a lot of odd things, isn't there? And also, Erin was asked by staff at the hospital, according to their testimony, twice if she had foraged the mushrooms herself, and she just ignored the question. So that's something else that came out. And we had a lot of expert testimony from people talking about, from mushroom experts to toxicology experts. But the thing that we have to remember is the toxicology report showed that Don, who had eaten 1.5 beef Wellingtons because he also polished off the half that Gail couldn't eat, he ate her half. He tested positive in his urine for these deathcap mushrooms. And as did Ian, the survivor, he tested positive. Now, one of the other ladies was not tested, and the other one was tested but didn't have any present. So strange that, isn't it? I wonder why she didn't. So anyway, apparently it's how long it stays in the body. Both Don and Ian, it came up in their urine. So apparently that's who knows how, does it depend if they had urinated or how often they'd urinated? I don't know how it works. But anyway, they definitely tested positive, as did the dehydrator, as did some of the leftovers. But Erin tested negative, as did one of those ladies, but the other lady was not tested. So that's basically where we are. As I say, if you can think of anything significant that you think I should have included in this sort of recap before we go into week 4, please put it in comments, that just for the information of other people that are watching. I try to, I'd be here all day if I would, because I'm trying to sum up 3 weeks of testimony in a short video. So I hope I've put the main points over. And as we go into week 4, I think what everyone is wondering 100% is, will Erin Patterson take the stand? Should she take the stand? Now, Ian Wilkinson has already taken the stand, as has Simon, her estranged husband. So really, as far as witnesses, actual witnesses, and her children have spoken in those video interviews. So as far as actual witnesses to the lunch, there's only Erin left, because of course, sadly, Don, Gail, and Heather, they're deceased. Though there has been sort of testimony from them because deathcap mushrooms are just so horrible. It's such a long, lingering death. There have been things said that the unfortunate victims said before they died, because it took them a long time to die. So this is an interesting case because, first of all, did Erin deliberately give them the mushrooms? And if she did, was it because she deliberately wanted to kill them, or did she just want to make the meal? What's the motive? The prosecution have said they're not even going to try for a motive. There doesn't have to be a motive. But of course, it's human nature. We're thinking, why did she do it? Because you always want to know why, if she did it. What was the other thing I wanted to say? Yeah, and it's a particular, again, allegedly, if she did it, it's a very horrible thing to do, to sit there and watch people eating something that is going to kill them, or at the very least make them really, really ill, and then tell them afterwards how you've got cancer, and they're all sitting there and praying for you. It's a really horrible thing, isn't it? If she is guilty, it's an extra sort of nasty way to dispose of someone, I think. And what is the reason? Just pure spite? Just pure spite with her ex? Or, she didn't even really know Ian and Heather. She hardly met them. Ian described her as an acquaintance. And she herself described Don and Gail as lovely people, were like the parents she'd not had, because apparently she had quite a difficult upbringing. Don't know if they're going to bring that into it. So anyway, I wanted to let you know what was happening, give a recap. I'll be back tomorrow with the latest in the trial. I'll be following it to the end. Let me know what you think in comments, and thank you so much for watching. Bye. Oh, and of course, may your God go with you. Bye.